Before we even get started, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. Listen to each and every part of this video. Some of this stuff you are going to think that you know already, but if you skip over it, you are going to miss some very important audio that I had to chop up and leave in various places of it. Hello and welcome to the Pretty Brown Rise channel. Now, as a huge music fan, and in particular the R&B genre, I am also a fan of the group Xscape in particular. And so, after watching the Xscape Still Kickin' It and the SWV and Xscape reality TV shows, I decided to take a deeper look into not only the group dynamic, but also the family dynamic of Tamika Scott and form a series about taking advantage of Tamika Scott on some of the things that I had noticed. Now, I would like for this video to serve as part 4 of that series, but in particular, it is going to focus on solving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, for once and for all, the real reason for the demise of the group Xscape by incorporating all of the different factors that went into play. So as fans, we are aware of the fact that Xscape was signed to Jermaine Dupri's So So Def label back in the day, and there they were able to come out with 3 platinum-selling back-to-back albums. One in 1993, Hummin' Comin' At Ya. In 1995, they gave us Off the Hook, and then in 1998, they gave us Traces of My Lipstick. What happened at that point in 1998 was one member, Latasha Scott, doing a solo album that never actually was released to the public. It was only after this epic fail that there began to be attempts to reform the group Xscape, but most notably, the change was going to be without Kandi Burruss, who had been given a leaving member notice and an ultimatum. So what we saw was between 2004 and 2006, there was an attempt to release the album Unchained with her replacement, Keisha Miles. And then in between time and thereafter, there were multiple attempts for the remaining 3 members to perform as a trio. My first question is, why was this not possible? Let's explore some of the reasons why a major label perhaps did not want to take on Xscape in these forms. One of the first things I'd like to do is kind of rewind back and look at a number of different factors that made Xscape pretty difficult and a gamble from the very start. And thereafter, with some of the things that they did, could have coupled with this factor and made them a high-risk group. One of those things from the beginning was pregnancies. Now, if you all are of the R&B community, you may remember back in the day, the Braxtons, another family-based singing group of sisters, much like Tamika and Latasha Scott, where one member in particular, Tracy, was removed from the group and the record deal due to her being pregnant in 1995. So as we say rest in peace to Tracy, I want to point out that the significance of mentioning Tracy and the Braxtons and that incident was the time frame. This happened in 1995 when Tracy got the axe, okay? So Xscape was already out at that time. So they had already been through this once and released the first and second album was being released around this time in 1995. Now, I want to say that there's a couple of factors that we need to grant them grace on. First of all, you're women, and thus women are going to, of course, bear more of the brunt and the consequences of pregnancy from a physical standpoint than men are, naturally, right? And also, that means that their career is also going to take a hit that men's career don't take just because they enter into parenthood. That's fair enough. I also would like to mention the youth factor of things and grant them some grace for youth because they were all between the ages of 17 to maybe 21. They really were young women. They were babies making these big decisions and being put in these difficult situations. However, we have to consider that so was JD. Jermaine Dupri was the same age roughly as Latasha. So he was also young college age at that time and running a record label of which they were the very first acts that he signed. He invested in these girls with no guarantee of a return on an investment. And after the very first major hiccup coming after the very first album, these girls then continued to do that twice more. So you have to admit that it kind of starts to look at like from a business standpoint and a record label standpoint, that every time these girls release an album, they also release a baby. So we are going to continue to have these disruptions and interruptions and setbacks as it pertains to rehearsals and performances and tours, basically the entire machine of making money with a music group. We have to look at the personal responsibility aspect of this and say that whereas we may be able, to grant Tamika as a teen for her teen pregnancy, what was the excuse for 2 more of the group members doing that shortly thereafter? Xscape really started to look like a reckless high-risk group from a business standpoint. So what that speaks to as far as a business standpoint is professionalism. So you already get bad marks there. Then you have to couple that with the fact that you all were kind of known for the bickering and arguing, particularly with Latasha and Kandi. So we get bad marks on professionalism there. So we have the pregnancies and the arguments. And then as we speak of professionalism, we also have to talk about the constant tardiness. It was known that Kandi was pretty much the most punctual one, but the other three kind of showed up whenever they want to, not too much known for being on time, but in particular, Tamika was notoriously late. In these types of industries, as in every aspect of life, time is money. So if you are renting a rehearsal space, a studio, and many other things, you are paying for different sessions by the hour. You're paying for engineers and choreographers and things of that nature. You're paying for their time by the hour. So if you have a group that has a problem with punctuality, that also goes to a lack of professionalism. Okay, so we have that out of the way. So let's talk about the heart of why the group broke up. It all started with a lack of fairness in the way that the lead vocals were assigned, jealousy over who was singing the lead vocals. So somebody says, but then the other half says that the problem was a diva attitude and someone wanting to go solo. Let's get everybody's version.
I found out that Kandi and Jermaine were dating.
They had a hookup, yes, but that had nothing to do with why the group broke up.
It was just not at a good time.
And it wasn't because Kandi slept with the producer, because we were already breaking up, dear.
You just don't kick it with the boss like that. That's in too deep, you know.
Things got worse when Latasha's boyfriend, Rocky Bivens, became the group's new manager.
So it was like, I was on one side, he was on the other side, pulling her. Certain things, to me, should be off limits.
Everybody was trying to make it, oh, Candy's jealous because Tasha's singing more on this album.
It was already tension with who's gonna sing this song and this song. From the second album, a lot of more producers wanted Tasha to lead. Ooh.
That is why the group broke up, is because Tasha wanted to go solo.
And just Kandi wasn't with that.
It wasn't her fault. She's not the one who said, I'm going solo. And she's not the one who got the big head and thought that they needed to be solo and they didn't need anyone else. So I can't put that on Kandi.
Tasha broke up the group. I'm like, that's not true.
Tasha had already let us know that she was going solo before we even recorded the third album.
But when Escape came to me, they were singing songs that involved everyone. The way I was writing the songs was pulling the group apart because Kandi started looking like the leader to y'all.
So Jermaine said, okay, well, what we're gonna do is after this third album, we're gonna do your solo project.
But Tasha was back here like, I'm the leader.
Yeah.
You know, and in groups, that's a problem.
I remember we were rehearsing to go on tour. She says, I just came to tell y'all that I'm going solo. And I mean, Kandi, you can go do your little modeling thing or whatever it is you do.
Tamika and Tiny, you know, y'all can go have more babies.
I'm not gonna sit around for you to continue to bash me and make you money and help you to get to the next position or whatever. I'm just gonna bow out gracefully.
Kandi, Tiny, and Tamika continued to promote the album as a trio through 1998. But with disappointed fans expecting to see all four members, they decided to call it quits.
We would have still been doing albums if it wasn't for this.
Bottom line, y'all can try to remix the story however you want to, but the decision for Latasha to go solo was selfish, and it was Tasha and Rocky's decision, and it ended up costing everyone millions. Let me show you the proof. So, for the third album, Traces of My Lipstick, based on the fact that the first two albums had gone platinum, the girls wanted to go into the negotiating table for the third album with their chest stuck out. And they asked for $4 million, rightfully so. Unbeknownst to them, what was going on with Tasha and Rocky behind their backs was Tasha was negotiating her solo album. But the stipulation that she put on it was, I'm not even going to record the third album if you don't agree in writing to give me my solo album. The only people who really wanted Tasha to go solo and advocated for her to go solo was Tasha and Rocky. And here's how I know that. That record label apparently only agreed to give Tasha that solo deal on paper. How do we know? That album never came out. They agreed to that so that they could get her to do this third album, Traces of My Lipstick. So here's how that went. According to Latasha and only Latasha, they offered her millions of dollars to do a solo project. So I'm going to put the number at 2 million for her because that's where plural starts. So according to Latasha, she agreed on a $2 million solo deal, made her an offer she can't refuse, right? So the record label started looking at that as, oh, okay, well, if there is this much fighting going on now before we even get in the booth on the third album, then they're probably not even going to finish it, or this is probably not going to turn out well. So they ended up only offering the girls $800K. So they went down from 4 million to $800K for that album. So due to Latasha's selfishness, it cost them $3.2 million at the negotiating table for Traces of My Lipstick. So when you couple that with the fact that a part of her contract was she really only had to promote the third album for like 3 weeks, and then she can go on about her life and start recording her solo album. It was a double whammy on the front end and on the back end. That's how bad Latasha played them and cost the rest of her group. Well, here's the problem with that. See, it's a little thing called karma, right? And you know they say she's a B word. So that $300K advance that they gave Latasha to start recording her solo album, according to her, she didn't spend that $300,000. She had only been in the booth like a couple of times or whatever. And I don't think she even completed a song or something like that. So there's no way that she spent that $300K, according to her. However, the tax man cometh. The record label cometh. And they said, no, you still owe us that money because we gave it to you. So they ended up shelving her project because nobody wants to work with somebody who gives them an ultimatum anyway. And then she still owed that $300,000. So you tried to play the girls and you cheated them out of over $3 million, but you ended up owing that record company $300K that you did not have to pay back, and you say you didn't spend. My question to you though, Tasha, is just because you didn't spend it, it doesn't mean that it didn't get spent. So you have your right-hand man and manager and negotiator that has access to anything and everything that you do. So how do you know he didn't run off with the bag? But either way, you ended up owing it. And now you'll make a series of attempts to come back and be with the group because you owe all of this money and because you can't hack it as a soloist. And I want to say that is the most unserious thing that I've ever heard when you consider you cost each and every one of these girls being millionaire status due to your selfishness. As it pertains to the amount of money that the other 3 members missed out on in Escape, here's another tidbit of information I want you to have.
I feel like everybody has a bad deal, their first deal. When we first signed to So So Def, if I can remember correctly, I think we only got like $12,000 to split between all 4 of us. You know what I'm saying? The main thing you were supposed to do is stick together as a group, get that attorney, so when you re-upped on the second album or the third or whatever album, then you can ask for a lot more money, or you go on tour and kill them on tour. The problem with our group was we could never be on the same page at the same time, so if we went on tour, we was only on tour for like a month.
So what we just learned here is a lesson in overplaying your hand. This is now the second time that Latasha has acted as a bully to the record label. Let the record reflect and let me refresh your memory that the first time was her threatening to leave the group if they kicked her pregnant sister out of the group. The second time was her threatening to leave the group and not record the third album if they did not agree to give her a solo album. You are consistently giving people ultimatums every time you do not get your way. And that is what ruined your career in this industry, coupled with, according to your other group mates, your dealings with Rocky being your manager. So now that you have overplayed your hand and ended up without a solo deal, let's look at the series of times where you tried to get the group back together. But also, just to be fair, since we talked about your flop album, let's talk about everybody else's flop album in the meantime and in between time between 2000 and 2010. Let's go. Now, this is my third upload attempt, and for some reason, the last 8 minutes of this video keeps tweaking and twitching. I don't know, like somebody else I know. It almost seems like somebody put a hex on it or sprinkle some crack on it or something. I'm not sure, but I tell you what, the last part of this was quite juicy, and it got into some of the details and the nitty gritty of why this phone was hacked. Tamika's phone was hacked in 2006, and what happened with that money in 2013. So you go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you will have it as soon as it drops, just in case they put another hex on it, honey. Stay tuned, and thank you for your patience.